Okay. Let's see. Do-do-do. Do-do-do-do. Do-do-do. Are we alive, ladies and gentlemen? Yes, there we go. What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to each and every one of you to Friday, the 20th of March. It is March, right? Yeah. Friday, the 20th of March. It is around 12 o'clock at the moment, so midday here in South Africa. Most of the Americans will still be in the wee hours of the morning. Places like China, I'm not even sure, probably around 7, 8, 9 o'clock. So fundamentally, everything that we're going to be discussing in the stream is only relevant for this period of time. And I actually miss when this wasn't necessary, when I didn't have to start a stream first with a disclaimer that things can change literally within half an hour after the stream. And the reason I miss it is it used to take months for things to change on the world stage, if they even changed at all. And these days, it's like as soon as you say something, something else can happen, and then suddenly it changes everything. So, firstly, let's say a very warm welcome to each and every one of you: Amanda, Casca, Diavolt, Adon, Tabiso. How you doing, sir? Another X. How you doing, Ulrich Stein? I hope you guys are doing super well. Thank you so much for joining me. And we'll just quickly do a little bit of house cleaning here, just a bit of housekeeping. I received a question on yesterday's video that I really just wanted to address because, well, I think it's pertinent. And I think a lot of people find this very confusing. So the question comes from HW. I won't say your surname just because I don't want to dox you, but it's HW, so Javier. And Javier says the following, or asks the following question. Stephen, just a question for my better understanding, and please correct me if I am asking the question incorrectly. You did not ask the question incorrectly, just by the way. When the American law is mentioned in the video, or American laws are being broken in South Africa, what exactly does that mean? Or should I ask, what does American law have to do with South Africa? Is it strictly trade law or what? Please explain. You have a great show, my friend. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you, Javier. And okay, so to answer that question, no, American law is not applicable in South Africa. So, for example, I cannot take the South African government to court and say that they have infringed upon my freedom of speech because of the Second Amendment of the United States of America. That does not apply. However, if, for example, I, as a private citizen, go to America and I break the law, right? So, South African law states that no South African citizen may join the Foreign Legion, a foreign military, or anything of that regard. As a South African citizen, you may join the South African military, but you can't join foreign militaries. So if I were to go to the United States and join the United States military, the South African government could actually bring a court case against me. So they could charge me. This would mean that if I ever set foot back in South Africa, I might be in trouble as a result of that, because under our laws, I'm not allowed to do that. Now, the same exists in corporate law, business law, and the like. So while American companies, when they come to South Africa, have to adhere to South African law, so BEE, affirmative action, employment equity, and all the rest of it, there are also American laws that govern what American companies are allowed to do in other countries. So a few years ago, there was a court case. I can't remember who it was against, but a corporation in America was found guilty, and they had to pay I don't know how many billions of rands in damages because they were found guilty of paying bribes to foreign sort of foreign workers and foreign governments in order to get contracts. And under American law, that is strictly prohibited. So even if the company is doing business in Kenya or Uganda or somewhere in the Middle East, that company is still not allowed to pay bribes to that nation. Even though the company is technically not in America, the law still applies to that company. And so, for example, when you have the United States government looking into the things that the South African government is doing, if the United States found that BEE fundamentally breaks the laws of American corporate law and American trade law and American business law, the American government could tell American companies, you are no longer allowed to do business in South Africa. This is sort of similar to what happened to Russia. Right now, you go to Russia, you will not find a McDonald's or a Coke or any of these brands there because the Russians were found guilty of American law, breaking American law, that is, and therefore sanctions were placed on Russia. As a result of that, all of those companies had to liquidate their assets and move away from Russia. So this is the law that America upholds for even their own companies, even though those companies might not be doing business in America. They're still American companies. Their headquarters are still located in America. And so if BEE were to break fundamental American laws, that would mean that that company has to pull out of South Africa, because that would mean that the South African legal system is in direct contradiction to the American legal system. Therefore, South Africa would then be declared effectively persona non grata. No business of America can do business within South Africa. There's a number of other things that they could do. So they could, from that, then pass things like isolation laws, which means that South Africa has to be completely isolated on the international stage. America could pass third country sanctions. So they could say any country that does trade with South Africa will face sanctions, or they could do third party tariffs. Again, same concept, just you're going to be tariffed if you do trade with South Africa. So there's like a bunch of different tools that the Americans can employ should South Africa be found guilty of, I believe it's Section 301, or the Section 301 investigations into it. And I would actually go out on a limb and say that there are a myriad of laws that exist within South Africa, and this on top of the fact that there is rampant corruption in South Africa. There is the knowledge that a lot of businesses in South Africa do bribe South African politicians and South African administrators in order to actually get contracts and in order to fast track contracts. And all of this will now be under review. So for a lot of American companies, they might actually be sweating bullets at the moment because they realize they have, in fact, paid bribes and so on and so forth. So there's a bunch of things that can now come out of this. And it's sort of, it's a worse place to be than what the tariffs were, because the tariffs was just sort of like a sweeping thing. We're going to put tariffs on your country. Now, South Africa is being investigated. This means that there might be a lot of things that come to the fore. I don't know if you guys remember a few weeks ago, there was this article from the mainstream media debunking the claim that Hezbollah and Hamas and Houthis were actually being trained here in South Africa. Now, I still believe that those articles that debunk it was done on behalf of the governing party, the ANC, and I believe that those articles, or the stories at least, were leaked by the Americans, because I think the Americans know. I think the Americans know. I won't say any more because this is a work in progress, but I have every reason to believe that Hamas was training in South Africa prior to the October 7th attacks. I have every reason to believe that there are international organizations, criminal terrorist organizations, that have very close ties to our military as well as to our government. That already is public knowledge. So there is a lot of information out there, and I think these investigations are going to go far and beyond just looking at trade deals. They're probably going to, because the intelligence services of America can't just put out claims. There needs to be investigations. So it is entirely plausible, if not even possible, that throughout these investigations, the CIA, the FBI, and all of the other three-letter organizations in America leaks information to these committees that are doing the Section 301 investigations, and suddenly a lot of things are unearthed and a lot of things are revealed about South Africa's sort of position within the world. Okay, so that answers that question, hopefully. Heinrich, how you doing? TFC, how you doing? OD Green, how you doing? Derrida, how you doing? I hope you guys are doing super well. Johan, Ravi, how you guys doing? Very, very happy to have you here. Okay, so now, before we get into the actual topic of conversation for today, there is a little bit of a disclaimer that I quickly want to put out there. Just addressing biases that I may or may not have, and addressing claims of allegiances, because I have been accused on this channel of being a Zionist. I have been accused of being a friend of Israel. I have been accused of being in the pocket of Israel. I've even had people suggest that I take money from Israel, which is fine. You're allowed to make those suggestions. I would say, though, if you were to see my bank account, you would realize that there is no evidence of that. And if there is, I'm a terrible negotiator because I'm clearly not asking for enough money or holding the bag, right, for the Israelis. In fact, so I'll put it to you like this. As a Christian, I am very apathetic towards Israel's existence or not. And I'll explain it to you as this. In Christianity, there are two main schools of thought when it comes to Israel. There is what is known as dispensationalism, and there are plenty of incredible Christians, people like John MacArthur, whom I view as just a strong man of the Christian faith, who was a dispensationalist. And then you have people like myself who are called covenantal Christians. Now, as a covenantal Christian, I believe that with the death of Jesus Christ, the first covenant, that was the covenant with Israel, was fulfilled. The covenant came to an end. And then with the resurrection of Christ, a new covenant came into existence. That is now the covenant of salvation. So covenant one, the covenant of death, came to an end with the death of Jesus Christ, and with the resurrection of Jesus came the covenant of grace and mercy for all the world. Dispensationalists, and again, there are brothers and sisters in the faith, but dispensationalists read their Bible slightly differently. They hold that no. The covenant of Jesus Christ, grace and mercy, yes, absolutely, but that applies to Gentiles. It applies to non-Jews. So Jesus Christ did come to die, did come to fulfill the covenant, but also to fulfill or to start a new covenant with the Gentile nations of the world. And thus, Israel is still under its own covenant. So the covenant of the Old Testament, God, the sacrifices, and all the rest of it, that covenant still exists. Now, they'll use passages, for example, where Paul says that God is not done with the nation of Israel. And they'll say, that proves that they're still under that covenant. They still have to sacrifice. The priest still has to forgive their sins and all the rest of it. So that's sort of what they draw upon. I obviously fall on the other side of it. If you ask me, Stefan, are you a Zionist or not? My answer would be relative to what? So, if you ask me to choose between the nation of Israel, the Jewish nation of Israel, or the Muslim nation of Palestine, I choose Israel every single time. Because while Jews may have a lot of things, and yes, Israel has a lot of skeletons in their closet, and Israel has done a lot of bad things throughout its existence, I do not deny that. I also know that the Palestinians have done some pretty terrible stuff as well, probably very much on par with that of the nation of Israel. What I do know, however, is that Jews don't have baked into their faith a genocidal need to conquer the entire earth. That's just not part of what the Jewish faith demands. Whereas Islam very much does have, as part of their faith, this genocidal need to conquer the entire earth, because Allah will not bring about paradise until all the world has been converted to Islam. So from that perspective, yeah, I think I'll choose Israel. But it's relative, because if the Palestinians were a bunch of Christians, I would probably be on the side of Palestine. I would probably be like, hey, if Palestine can conquer the nation of Israel and turn them into a Christian nation, more power to them, right? So for me, it's really just a case of either or. I don't have a specific allegiance to Israel. I don't have any allegiance to Palestine. My allegiance lies to my country. I care about South Africa. And from South Africa's perspective, the war in Israel is very far away. I don't believe that there's going to be bombs dropping on South Africa because of the stuff that's happening there, right? South Africa is just too far away, and I don't think South Africa is important enough in that regard. So I don't really care, right? So just to make that very, very clear, I don't have a Zionist thing where I believe that Israel is the chosen people of God. I believe that Christians are the chosen people of God, and therefore I want people to convert and I want people to become Christian, but I don't have a firm alliance to either of those nations. For me, it is a case of relative to. So yeah, just to sort of put that into perspective for all of you. Okay, so with that preamble out of the way, Kita Kat, how you doing? The the Amaro, how you doing, bro? I'm sorry, can't pronounce your name at the moment. Alberta, how you doing? I hope you guys are doing super well, every single one of you, even the ones that aren't typing in chat. I really hope that you guys are having a wonderful day. It's time for us to start talking. Now, there is this thing that is happening in South Africa that is just, it's making the downfall all the more sweeter, at least in my opinion. There's something about arrogance being repaid with destruction that just makes things nice. It's nice when a truly arrogant group of people get taught a severe lesson. And I believe that that lesson is closer at hand than anyone may have ever thought. And this live stream, by the way, isn't about some outside threat coming about to threaten the ANC. In fact, far from it. What I'm talking about today isn't America putting pressure on South Africa or Israel putting pressure on South Africa or Europe putting pressure on South Africa. None of that. I believe that the ANC, in their zeal for Iran, in their sort of hatred of Israel, may have just imploded their own country. And I'll explain it to you in a second. But let's just quickly talk about this. We will not be bullied. For the last year and a half, the ANC has had this incredibly sort of antagonistic relationship with America. Every single time America has asked the ANC to just let go of a lot of their terrorist tendencies, the ANC has doubled down with this idea of we're a sovereign nation, you don't get to tell us what we can and cannot do. Now, let's quickly talk about sovereignty. Sovereignty means independence. It means that you are a nation in your own right. Sovereignty must always be accompanied with security. You cannot claim to be a sovereign nation if you cannot defend your own nation. It is completely antithetical to the idea. Right now, the only reason South Africa actually exists as a country is because of the goodwill or perhaps the ineptitude of our neighbors. The South African military is non-existent. The South African Navy is non-existent. The South African Air Force is non-existent. So the question has to be, in an event where the sovereignty of South Africa is truly challenged, what chance does South Africa have to actually defend this so-called sovereignty? And the answer is none. So South Africa's sovereignty is reliant on the goodwill of other nations. That means you're not a sovereign state. That means you are, in essence, a vassal state. You exist and you're allowed to do things, but it's only because other countries are nice to you. It's not because you have the ability to defend those rights. And this goes into a much deeper philosophical conversation about where rights actually originate from and whether or not there is such a thing as universal rights. I do not believe that there is, by the way. I believe that rights are only ever fought for and gained through violence. And if you can hold on to those rights, either through violence or through threat of violence, then those are your rights and you can have them. The second you no longer have those rights, or the second you no longer have the ability to defend and protect those rights, you no longer have those rights. You may have them in theory, but they're not really yours. So the ANC's sort of we will not be bullied, this falls on deaf ears because all the ANC really has at their disposal is a bunch of propaganda, all centered, and we spoke about this yesterday, on this misaligned and completely asinine belief in a multipolar world with international institutions that exist in order to protect their sort of empire or reign of terror. And now we'll quickly just take a moment to talk about these international communities, things like the United Nations and things like the International Criminal Court of Justice, and these organizations that are meant to protect the new global order. These organizations was an attempt that was born out of Francis Fukuyama, The End of History, and The Last Man's Book, and the philosophy of geoeconomics. The idea that the whole world would eventually become democratic. The world, led by America, by the way, these were not things that the rest of the world asked for. These were things that America demanded. The rest of the world sort of came together and said, how could we demand that the rest of the world become democratic if we, the world, are not democratic? And so this idea was born that, hey, let's form a union, the United Nations. And this union will be how we declare and deal with all disputes. So we will do so on a democratic basis, as much as countries can be democratic. Because the fundamental truth is that all countries everywhere in the world exist in an anarchic state. They're anarchists. There is no true government above all other governments, keeping those governments in line. Governments are merely governed by what they can do and what they can't do. There is really no law that does this. The United Nations was an attempt to redress that and say, well, actually, now there is a bunch of laws that do govern how countries can and cannot interfere with one another. The problem was always for the world that it was America that enforced those laws. If a country did break those laws repeatedly, it would be the American government that would act against that country. And so, really, it was still America expressing and sort of projecting its own power into the world, only now through this sort of democratic lens. Donald Trump came to power and he effectively said, hell to the no. We're done with this nonsense. We're done playing democracy. And I think for good reason. You may say a lot of things about a world governed by superpowers, and perhaps you like it, perhaps you don't. But the one truth of a world governed by a unipolar power is that it is predictable. When you have the one power being able to police the entire world, everyone knows what they can and cannot do, because the one power determines that. And everyone has to adhere to what the one power says. And so what we found in the era sort of after 1949, 1948 maybe, and sort of all the way up to, I would say, like the early 90s, is it's not as if war disappeared, but largely the world became a lot more peaceful, relatively speaking, relative to the periods before that. We didn't have large-scale world wars that involved the entirety of Europe or the entirety of Africa being dragged into war. It was very much regionalized conflicts where, different countries may be disagreeing or arguing over borders. Or here in South Africa, we had ideological wars that we were fighting in Angola, trying to stop the spread of communism, a war that we sadly lost. We won the war, but we lost the battle. That's effectively, or actually we won the battle, but we lost the war because communism did eventually take over in all of the countries where we were trying to stop communism from actually taking over. But these were generally regionalized wars. But the large wars were done. And the reason they were done was America said, oi, I make the rules. You guys play by my rules and you don't interfere with my stuff, it's fine. The second you interfere with my stuff, I'm coming for you. And the whole world knew where they stood and everyone played ball. Everyone played and everyone got very, very rich as a result of that. With the advent of the international world order, we start to see a new thing happening. Far more conflict internally, so countries are starting to tear each other apart internally. We start to see a lot of countries sort of positioning themselves and working themselves around the fringes in order to attack this system and ultimately bring down the system and place their own system as an answer to this. If you didn't have the international-based rules order, something like BRICS would have immediately been answered with absolute decisive military response. No superpower allows for even the whisper of a contender. And so it needs to be understood in that way. America is merely now saying, well, enough of the play acting. The world cannot continue in this direction. We have seen the harm that this international rules base, because effectively what it did is it made all other countries that were on board very, very lazy. Europe became basically a nation of beggars. They had these governments that were handing out free stuff to all of their citizens. Why? Because Europe never had to pay for anything. Europe could just take from America all of the really expensive stuff, the defensive stuff, and Europe could spend their own money on their own citizens. Effectively, America got to a point where they were just like, look, we're done subsidizing your socialist tendencies. You have to pay for it yourself. And you're already starting to see a lot of European nations going, well, this is getting super expensive. Like suddenly having to pay. And you just had the UN, not the UN, the NATO chief, the secretary of NATO, was asked at the European Parliament, what is the chances of Europe being able to defend themselves without America? This was maybe 3 or 4 days ago. And the secretary of NATO, the general secretary of NATO, effectively said there's zero chance. zero. And he basically said to the member, I believe it was the member of Spain that was asking this, and he said to the member of Spain, you guys don't even want to pay your 5% that you agreed to with President Trump's first term. And now you want to ask, can we do it without America in the first place? Well, 5% isn't enough. If you want to exclude America from the defense and protection of Europe, every single country in Europe would have to increase defense spending to about 15% in the immediate term, and probably even higher than that, because they are so far behind the rest of the world because they've allowed things to get so bad in their own countries. If that were to happen, even if it was just 10%, the European nation or the European continent would be bankrupt. So effectively, it made everyone lazy, and the enemies of the West, China, Russia, South Africa, Iran, these nations found that weakness to be incredibly fun because they were able to play off these nations against one another and plot in the darkness. So that is over. Fikile Mbalula still doesn't understand this. But okay, so let's now get to some of the more... how do I want to approach this? Let me show you guys first this before we even get going. So this is from the Times of Israel. Before you go, I hate Israel. I don't want to listen to them. The blog is still super interesting because the blog reveals a massive flaw in the ANC's thinking, a blind spot that the ANC did not think through. And here it is. I'm not going to read the whole blog, but you can if you want to. It's literally on the Times of Israel. You can find it there. What did South Africa do after October the 7th? They took Israel to the International Criminal Court of Justice. Do you guys know what the argument is from the South African government as to why Israel must immediately respect the statehood of Palestine? The South African legal team argues that the people of Palestine have the right to self-determination, based on the fact that they are a nation that can be recognized throughout history. There are a lot of questions about that statement when it comes to the Palestinian people specifically. And if you know the actual history, you will know that the Palestinian people that are currently living there, they don't actually come from that region. They are people from Lebanon, Egypt, Syria, that was sort of left over in that area after years and decades and millennia of fighting between one another. It finally, just sort of, they were stuck there. And now they call themselves Palestinians, but they are in fact not Palestinians. But the ANC argues, nevertheless, that these people have the right to self-determination. The issue? That suddenly opens the door to every single African or South African tribe to claim the exact same. Guys, let this very quickly sink in. The Ndebele people, the Zulu people, the Xhosa people, the Sepedi people, the Afrikaner, the English, the colored, the Khoisan. Every single one of those groups, based on South Africa's determination, why Palestine must be considered an independent state, every single one of those groups have the ability to demand the same. And before you go, well, that's not in South Africa, the International Criminal Court is a pretty useless court. It has no ability to enforce anything. What it does have, however, is the ability to establish legal precedent. All nations that belong to the International Criminal Court can be held liable to the precedent or the legal precedent that is set at the International Criminal Court. So if the International Criminal Court were to find in favor of the ANC's motion, that would suddenly mean that here in South Africa, the courts would have to be held to the same legal precedent. If the people of Palestine has the right to demand their own statehood, so too does the Zulu. So too does the Afrikaner. So too does the English. So too does the Khoisan. So too does the colored. So too does the Sepedi. So too does the Twani. Every single group that can claim that they have an historical nation can now suddenly claim that they are independent nations and that their countries should be recognized under international law. And the nations that aren't that friendly to South Africa, like, for example, the US, could use that exact same article in front of the International Criminal Court of Justice to say, boys, you opened the door to this. We are recognizing each and every one of these nations as independent nations because you opened the door. This is in front of the International Criminal Court of Justice. They found in your favor. Now, let's go. So the ANC in their zeal and zest for Iran, and to sort of show you guys, the ANC in their zeal and zest. Now, listen to what Fikile Mbulula, I just love this guy. Like, his name, one of the funniest names to say. He's a moron, but his name is amazing. Fikile, may you live long and prosper, sir. But listen to the disinformation and how the ANC likes to phrase things around this question. So, the media briefing on the People's March, he is asked. On the disinformation, the first question he gets is about the funding of the International Criminal Court of Justice in the case that was brought about. On the disinformation peddled by drunkards on South Africa being paid by Iran for the ICJ case, the response. There is a so-called billionaire, he's talking about Rob Hersov here, who goes to podcasts and lies that the ICJ case was funded by Iran. This is a lie. This is a clear-cut lie by Fikile Mbulula and the ANC. Rob Hersov does not claim that Iran funded the court case. Rob Hersov, myself, and others have claimed and continue to claim that Iran funded the ANC so that the ANC could bring the court case. He, of course, holds that no. The state is paying for this court case. So the taxpayer is paying for this court case. But that's twisting. He is saying that they're bringing a lawsuit against Rob Hersov for these claims. I actually think Rob Hersov might be really excited to get his hands on this lawsuit. And the reason I believe Rob Hersov might be really excited to get his hands on this lawsuit is that would immediately open the ANC to one request that might actually kill them. Reveal all of your funding. Reveal all of your financial funding for the last 5 years. Everything. Every donor, every dollar, every rand, any money you got has to be revealed. Because you just brought a case against me. You said that I was lying, that Iran did not fund you. Therefore, you now have to make that known to the people, right? So I don't believe that this lawsuit will ever actually happen. I think the ANC is saying that they will do it, but they're trying to scare Rob so that he stops bringing this. I don't believe that that will have any claim or any sort of real tooth at the end of the day. But fundamentally, when it comes to the implosion, how likely is it? If I could quickly bring our attention to that. So on the Common Sense podcast, Frans Cronje, the one of the founders of SRF, revealed a number of interesting polls. A number of very interesting polls. So the SRF went and they polled a few municipalities throughout South Africa. Quite a few. And there's some very interesting things that's being revealed. Across around 100 medium to large municipalities in the country, it looks as if the ANC will not get a clear-cut majority in any of them. In fact, if they look at Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni, and Tshwane, the ANC might not even be able to get 30% in any of those. The ANC and the DA are effectively neck and neck in all of these polls. Now, Frans Cronje did say, and I'll state this just for posterity's sake, or just for clarity's sake, Frans Cronje did state that these are not predictions. These polls are, if the election was held last week, this would have been the result. The ANC and the DA would both have been around 30%. So the ANC's support across the entire country is being eradicated. The number that stood out to me the most and really prompted this live stream is Durban. In Durban, the ANC is now effectively a non-existent party. Their support hovers around 10%. The party that has come through in droves is the MK. The MK now sits well over 50% in Durban. And it's probably going to be across the whole of the KwaZulu-Natal even higher. This means that by the local government elections, the MK will have complete control of KwaZulu-Natal. By the next national elections, the MK will win KwaZulu-Natal in an outright majority. This effectively means that the ANC now has control, to some extent, of the Eastern Cape. They have control of Mpumalanga and Limpopo. In every single other municipality in this country, every single other province in this country, the ANC no longer holds a clear majority. Now, this opens a number of interesting questions. A few years ago, SRF had another poll. They're polling secession. They were asking different groups in the country how they felt about secession. Take a guess how many Zulus felt strongly in favor of secession. This was a few years ago, remember. Kurz, we'll get to it. We'll get to the difference between the MK and the ANC. But for now, just quickly take a guess. What do you guys think is the... Prabal, how you doing? Specky, how you doing? Turksvay, how you doing? Tarako, how you doing? The answer is over 50% of Zulus support secession. Over 50% of Zulus. So what do you think happens when the MK takes KwaZulu-Natal in the national election? What is stopping the MK from announcing secession? They have the support of the Zulu nation. The Zulu does not want to be part of South Africa. They want to be ruled by a Zulu. That is why they're supporting the MK. The difference between the ANC and the MK is that. That's their fundamental difference. The MK is and will always be a Zulu first party. They care about the Zulu people. And I believe getting their hands on KwaZulu-Natal is, in many ways, the only thing they're really interested in. They want KwaZulu-Natal. So it opens up a number of interesting sort of dilemmas for the ANC. Remember, the ANC now has a number of court cases by the next election, and I actually make the prediction that this will happen. By the next election, the ANC will be inundated with court cases from international or from national interest groups for secession. Now the next election happens. If all things remain the way that it is, the ANC at the next election will probably dip below 30%. The DA might get close to 25, maybe even close to 30%. The MK, I actually think we could see an MK with about 20% of the vote. Freedom Front, 5, maybe 10% if we allow ourselves to dream. PA with maybe around 5 to 10% of the vote. This opens a very new reality for South Africa. Because the Zulu people is the largest ethnic group in the country. And if all of those Zulus, or even half of those Zulus, were to vote for the MK, that is a significant portion of vote share that the MK now has. So what is to stop the MK from saying, look, DA, we'll support you becoming the president and the ruling party of South Africa against the ANC with one request. You grant KwaZulu-Natal independence, or at the very least federalization. KwaZulu-Natal gets to determine its own future. What is to stop them? Remember, the MK hates the ANC. And they hate the ANC, not just Cyril Ramaphosa. They hate the ANC because the ANC is moving further and further away from Zulus. Patrice Motsepe coming into power, if he is, in fact, the next leader of the ANC, the Zulus are still not going to respect Patrice Motsepe because Patrice Motsepe comes from the same poison vine from the Zulu perspective as Cyril Ramaphosa. So they're still going to say, no thanks, we have no interest in this. And the DA, if they know what's good for them, would actually accept this because the DA themselves have been arguing for federalization of South Africa for quite a long time. This would mean that the DA could go to the MK. MK doesn't even have to come to the DA. The DA could go to the MK and say, look, we have around 25% of the vote. You have around 20% of the vote. If we go to the Freedom Front Plus and we get them to support us, we have over 50% of the vote. Suddenly now the DA could tell the MK, we're going to federalize the whole country. You get to run and control KwaZulu-Natal in whichever way you want. It's your province. You do with it what you want. As the national government, we are going to give more power to the provinces. The MK would jump at that because all Jacob Zuma and the MK actually care about is making money. And you can make a lot of money if you have control of a single province. And the ANC would have opened the door for this. Because these nations are either going to demand federalization. Oh, well, actually, the nations, and I believe that this is going to happen. I believe that the Zulu is going to use this court case as a way to get succession on the ballot. And I believe that the Cape Independence Movement is probably going to use this court case from against Israel to get it on the ballot. You're probably going to see the Xhosa people, to some extent, there is a movement within the Eastern Cape for independence for the Xhosa people, but as far as I know, it's a pretty small movement. So that movement has not really taken steam or taken speed yet. But if those court cases are brought, the ANC has no defense. They were the ones who opened the door to this. More importantly, it's going to mean one of two things. Either the ANC holds on and we do end up with a bunch of independent states with the Republic of South Africa effectively halved in size, or, and this is far more likely, federalization. The ANC, in a desperate bid to at least hold on to the country, will just go, okay, fine, we'll give more power to the provinces so that the provinces can basically do whatever they want to do without national government really interfering. This is a good thing for all of us. It's a really bad thing for the ANC. Now, we can talk a lot about the ANC and how America is going to clamp down on the ANC, because I believe that is coming. I believe that is going to come in a very real way, in a very big way. But for now, I genuinely think, the ANC may have made one of the most crucial in Afrikaans, we call it a footvote. They made a misstep, a giant unforced error that just opened the door to all of these begrudged nations in South Africa to effectively say, well, we want to be independent as well. We want to be recognized as independent states. The people of Orania could already do this now with this new case being brought. I'll be interested to know what the ANC is going to do when that happens. Because I genuinely believe that as we've gone on, as we've moved further and further away from 1994, the ANC has gotten less and less intelligent. There's been a sort of an eroding of the intelligent people within the ANC towards ever more hardline ideological proponents. So these aren't people who actually understand, because Joe Slovo, who was one of the intellectual giants of the ANC, Joe Slovo understood the failings of old school communism and therefore dreamt up a new communist vehicle, a new way of doing communism that would actually be far more successful than the Soviet Union. I believe that those people in power in the ANC today, they don't have the mental acuity of Joe Slovo. They can't think that far ahead. They don't understand how the Soviet Union came to end. And so, from their perspective, they're just hardline communist adherents. And it was those hardline communist adherents that ultimately helped destroy the Soviet Union. Because when everyone was warning them, we're a weak state, they believed that communism can never end. Because they were true believers. So from their perspective, there's no way that people would demand freedom from this glorious system. This is the system. And you can actually look at Paul Mashatile. I tweeted this out earlier this morning. Paul Mashatile comes out with the following. Let me reiterate this point without any fear of contradiction. Abandoning BBBEE is not an option. Abandoning BBBEE would mean abandoning transformation itself. BBBEE is a necessary tool for transformation, essential for achieving economic equality. This is the kind of leadership we currently have in our country. A group of people that do not understand that the very policy that they tout as transformational is destroying their hopes and dreams. Look, they love BEE because it actually makes them very, very rich. Cyril Ramaphosa got rich because of BEE. And when you actually look at what they're now suggesting for BEE, it's going to get worse, not better. Everyone was sort of touting, oh, the ANC is finally admitting that they need to start talking about it. But look at what they want to do. They want to improve implementation of BBBE. They want to make sure that those companies that are finding gaps in triple BEE or in the compliance of triple BEE, those gaps are closed, so that no company can find loopholes. This is how you do business in South Africa. If you don't do it, we'll punish you severely. So they're doubling down on this. They're not actually, backing off. This is what you saw in the Soviet Union as well. The more the plans didn't work, the harder they started doing the plans. Because the idea is that you just need to keep going. Eventually, these plans will work. And yes, if some of your people have to starve and suffer as a result of that, then that's the price that they have to pay. So I'm sort of reminded of the king in Shrek. Where he said something to the effect of, if all of you are to be killed by lightning now, that is a price I'm willing to pay. Something to that effect. This is sort of where we are in South Africa. These leaders believe that they're not going to be the ones who pay the price. But it's interesting to note, when you actually look at what's happening in Iran right now, the US Treasury just froze the bank accounts of all of the leadership of Iran. US Treasury. So America is literally fighting a war against Iran on all fronts. Militarily, in the Navy, in the air, and now financially. All of their bank accounts have been frozen. So these leaders are starting to defect. You have actually a lot of Iranian leadership that are starting to defect because they've just realized they had a nest egg. Right? The plan was always, if this thing ends, we'll just flee to Russia. And we'll just live out our days in Russia, making videos saying how bad America is. But how do you flee to Russia when you have no money? When your bank accounts are frozen? So America is going after the bank accounts of these individuals. What do you think is going to happen to South African politicians? Because that's what America is going to do. I believe that is part of what's happening in these Section 301 investigations. I believe that America is going to freeze the bank accounts of a lot of our top leadership, including old Cyril, Fikile, and effectively these guys are going to learn the hard way that you can and you will be bullied. Take everything from them. I think we all agree with that. If SA loses the ICJ case and Palestinians are not allowed to have a state, does that not mean that there will be a refusal for the tribe in SA to have our own state? Not really, Mario, because the ANC still opened the door, right? And so they could still argue that while the exact requirements for the Palestinian people were not met, those requirements may in fact be met by local people here in South Africa. Right, so it's gonna depend fundamentally on that one question. It's gonna depend also on why the case is thrown out. Right, Palestinians have refused the state numerous times. True, the DA will never agree to federalization. They want complete control. They need to keep their masters. So, Hannes, while I would agree with you in theory, in practice, I think you're overestimating the power that the DA thinks they have. So while, yes, if it was possible for the DA to get full control of South Africa, I believe the DA would want full control of a full intact South Africa. I think even the DA understands that they don't have the ability to gain full control of South Africa. The DA understands that even if they were to win the national election, the ANC will pretty much hold on to Eastern Cape, Mpumalanga, and Limpopo for at least as long as anyone is alive at the moment. They understand that the MK will pretty much always hold control of KwaZulu-Natal. They will understand that in many of the provinces of South Africa, their rule is highly contested. And so, from the DA's perspective, it would be far easier for the future if the states or the provinces are given more power. Right? Because the DA would understand their survival or their success in government is not guaranteed. And there's a good chance that they might lose the next national election. And rather than go back under an ANC government that will just immediately start taking power again, the DA might just say, look, if we can federalize, even if we lose the next election, we still have control of our provinces. And we can run those provinces in the way that we want without national government interference. So I think there's a reality on the ground that may just force the DA's hand. One-party rule in South Africa is something you will see in the rearview mirror. Joan, so I have my own opinion on that. To some extent, I do agree with you that one-party rule in South Africa is probably something that we will see only in the rearview mirror. That no one party will ever again gain control of South Africa. But that is sort of reliant on a lot of if, buts, maybes, and whens. So that is reliant on provided MK, ANC, and EFF don't come back together. Because if they merge back together, one party rule once again in full force. Remember that. Together, they still have the exact same vote share that the ANC had in 1994. Now, provided there's many more millions of people who do not vote in South Africa at the moment than what didn't vote in 1994, but I'm not sure who those people would actually vote for, and so it's all up in the air. We don't know how these apathetic voters would actually ultimately vote. So one-party rule, probably something in the rearview mirror, but it is also reliant on the idea that there is continuity within the South African project. I actually firmly believe, in my heart of hearts, I do not believe that democracy is possible in a country like South Africa. And we will have a live stream on this on Monday, because it is a topic that I really want to dive into a lot more detail of. But I believe that democracy can only ever work given cultural background. And I believe very specifically that democracy only works if all people in the country want the same things from their governments. Let me ask you guys a question. Because this is a conversation that I have had before, and I think I've discussed this with some of you before. You'll oftentimes hear the claim, all people everywhere just want to live. They just want freedom. But when you actually dive into freedom, the next question you have to ask is, what do you mean when you say freedom? Like, when you say you just want freedom, what do you mean? Because there's many arguments that you can make around freedom, right? And I've discussed this with you guys before. If you're a Muslim, you could very easily say, well, true freedom only comes from Allah. Therefore, everyone has to follow Allah because that's where true freedom comes from. Therefore, to convert everyone to Islam is the way to bring freedom. Therefore, freedom means to follow Islam. So it's a logically coherent argument from their perspective. So it makes sense when you say everyone wants freedom. But what does that freedom look like? That's where things change. And I would argue that in South Africa, that freedom, people want freedom, liberty, the right to pursuit of happiness. That's all true. All people want that. All people want that. But what does that mean? So, for example, you said all people want safety, jobs, and religion. Adon, let me ask you this. What does safety constitute? What does it mean to be safe? Because you and I might mean we need a police that polices the criminals and make sure that the criminals don't oppress us. That's what safety means, right? But you might get people that say, actually, safety means that I am safe not losing my job and, not losing my livelihood. So safety for me means massive labor laws, because that's also safety. And you might get another person that says safety means that I must be able to get a job. So now suddenly we have something like employment equity, right? Jobs. What does jobs mean to you? Does a job mean the right or the ability to go get a job? Or does a job mean a job's given to you? That's going to mean different people, right? I believe that every single person must have the right to get a job. But you still have to go and get the job. You still have to prepare yourself and make yourself employable. I don't believe that people have the right to work. You have the right to access to work, but if you can find a job, you can work. If you can't find a job, you don't work. I also don't believe that people have a right to homes. What do you mean? You have the right to build a house if you can afford it, and if you can buy the land, sure, go build your house. But you don't have the right to demand that I build you the house. And if you just say I have the right to a house, that means that you should be able to force other people to build you a home. And that I don't agree with, right? But there are people who actually do agree with this. What poll question do you guys want? Because I see a bunch of people saying, ask a poll, ask a poll. I don't even know how to do polls here, guys. Hey, what are you guys asking me? I haven't done polls in a very long time here. Let's do, okay, start a poll. What is the poll that you guys want? What is the question? Because I see a lot of you wanting to see this. I know what I'll say. Can democracy work in South Africa? Is that good enough for you guys? We'll start with that as a poll question. All right. Can democracy work in South Africa? No, you can still vote. It's just, you can just vote on like an open-ended question. Leave it open-ended for you, right? So you could say, well, actually, no, because more generally speaking, I don't believe democracy works. Or yes, I believe in democracy. You see, democracy, if you look at what the fathers of sort of philosophy, people like Aristotle, people like Plato, they all said that democracy has one fundamental flaw. As the people's interests sort of diverge, you will ultimately end up with politicians that choose the easy path rather than the hard path. So politicians will only ever do what is popular, even if what is popular is not sustainable. And I would argue that here in South Africa, the biggest reason democracy cannot work is because when you ask an Afrikaner and a Zulu and a Sepedi person, what do you want from the government? They will all answer, I want freedom, safety, jobs, and security. That's it. That's what I want from the government. But what they mean with freedom, jobs, safety, security is completely different things. It doesn't mean the same thing. And so I fundamentally believe that no one government can rule South Africa. And I don't believe that a coalition government can rule South Africa. I believe that the only future for South Africa is the nation state. It has to become a nation of nation states. And that doesn't mean that those nation states can't, to some extent, work together. They can, right? And maybe they can even have unified sort of trade agreements with one another. But if you have a group of people in your country that wants A and a group of people in your country that wants B, and A and B is completely conflicting, that does not mean that democracy works. It means that you're going to have, at some point, a train smash. And that's where I think South Africa is headed. As Asmongold said, there is too many tribes in Africa with different things. Yeah, Asmongold isn't wrong. Africa has way too many tribes for Africa to be a single anything. Right? It cannot work. I actually think, and I'll go even bolder than that. I do believe that democracy is dying. It's going to be a bold one. And I can already see a lot of people going, whoa, whoa, whoa. I believe democracy is dying. I don't believe that democracy will exist for another 100 years. I believe democracy made a little bit of sense when nations were severely isolated. I think that worked, at least for a while. Chad, I see what you're writing. You don't need to spam. I did see it. Um, I think the biggest issue you have is in a world where people can travel and people have sort of intermixed, and now you have nations like the UK, for example, where a large percentage of their population is no longer British born. Democracy is going to cease to exist. So either one of two things is going to happen. A lot of countries throughout the world, including America, I don't believe that America, the United States of America, will exist for another 100 years. I could be mistaken, and there is an avenue through which I can see it existing. So there is a scenario in which I see the American empire continue to exist, but I'll get to that in a second. So one or two things will happen here. Either the Europeans will wake up and they'll tell every single non-Frenchman, non-German, non-Italian, non-Englishman to leave their countries immediately. That means democracy remains preserved. Because it's actually, interestingly, democracy isn't a new concept. Like, you go back to Greece, it started there, then the Romans took it forward. So democracy is not a new concept. Even in feudal Middle Ages, we find that democracy did exist. It didn't exist in the way that we think of it today, right? So we today think you go to a polling station, you vote, and your vote gets counted. But what would oftentimes happen in sort of feudal villages is the elders of the village would not just make decisions on behalf of everyone. The elders of the village would ask the village how they felt about individual things happening. And then the village would have a say. The village would have the ability to say, well, I don't actually agree with this. We should probably do it this way. And then everyone would sort of figure it out, and then bam, right? You would have a democratically elected decision that would be made. Yes, the village elder wasn't necessarily democratically elected because he's the elder, but the ideas, the things that the village did, that was democratically elected for. And you sort of have evidence throughout history of leaders who didn't listen to the people being killed, right? So when the people felt like their elders were not listening to them, the elders would just be killed, and that would be it, right? So there's some interesting stuff there. Democracy is very, very old, and it forms part of all societies. But the one thing that is required for democracy to work is that everyone means the same thing when they say something. Right? So if I tell you that is red, if everyone doesn't agree that that is red, democracy can't exist. Because if I made a rule and said everyone has to have a red car, and then suddenly half the people are driving green cars, well, now we have a problem, right? We've decided democratically that everyone must have red cars, but one half of the population sees green as red, and the other sees red as red, right? And maybe some have even yellow. So it creates confusion, and it definitely makes it harder for that system to actually operate, because the system only ever operates when everyone has the same culture. And this is where we get to multiculturalism. Multiculturalism, as it's been touted as a strength, it's a pipe dream, and it is a lie. Multiculturalism isn't a strength. In fact, multiculturalism is the guaranteed death of democracy. You see, because democracy installs within it. Bill Clinton, thank you so much for the donation. I truly appreciate you, sir. The 140 rands. I could not do this without your financial help. So thank you, thank you, thank you. You're far too kind. And I'll read your message in a second, sir. If I want to have a democracy, I need to be sure that everyone votes for the prosperity of the nation and everyone agrees on what prosperity would look like for the nation. Because leaders get a lot of power in democracies, modern day democracies. And if we have one half of the population voting for stuff that really will not make us prosperous as a nation in the long term, that's truly very bad, right? And so I argue that America will probably fracture. You're most likely going to end up with one half of America becoming its own country and another half of America becoming its own country. I don't believe that it will be north to south or even east to west. I think it's going to be a sort of mismatch of a bunch of different states that all band together, and then a bunch of different states that all band together, and they're going to sort of largely agree on the same things. So one half of America will probably turn into a communist hellscape, and the other half will hopefully remain a really good capitalist nation. With one exception. Let me ask you guys this. What is the one thing that could save America as well as all of the individual European nations from the demise of democracy? Ian, you're probably not wrong. Little mustache man. No. Think more broadly. Don't think of a single enemy, because enemies can work for a bit because you'll unite everyone against the enemy, but enemies go away. And once the enemy goes away, the problems will still be there. So no, think more. What is the one thing? Let's just focus on America. What is the one thing that can save America? That can preserve the American democracy? And I see 80% of you said no. Democracy cannot work in South Africa. Nice. I agree with you guys. What saved Rome's democracy? Now, it's going to sound weird because technically it also ended Rome's democracy, but it did save Rome. Dictatorship. When the Rubicon was crushed or crossed, that saved Rome. If Caesar did not cross the Rubicon, Rome would have been destroyed. Rome was busy destroying itself. It was a dictator that came and saved it. And I believe that if you want to save democracy, as it were, in Europe, in South Africa, even in America, dictators could save it. And now you might say, but wait, people don't like living under dictatorships. And that's not true. That's not true. People don't care who they live under, provided that the person that rules them leaves them alone. As long as people feel that there is order and there is safety and they have freedom as they define freedom, people don't really care. The Romans didn't care that suddenly they had a dictator because the dictator made things work. Right? Things worked. For the most part, the Roman citizen was still allowed to be the Roman citizen. He wasn't coming with sweeping changes to the way they did business and to the way they ran their societies. He was just coming to stop the political corruption in Rome. And sure, he created a bunch of new corruption later on, but fundamentally that saved Rome. That pushed back the fall of Rome that would inevitably still consume it. People don't care. People hate corrupt dictators. Yes. Dictators that oppress their own people. People hate that. But a dictator that is just doing, I don't know who that is. A dictator that is just doing their jobs and doing it to the best of their ability and actually fixing the country for the most part. Imagine this. So let's imagine for a second I am the dictator of South Africa. And I come in, and on my first day, I say to the Zulu people, the Sepedi people, the Afrikaner people, the English people, guys, I recognize your independence. I am going to make a number of baseline rules. We'll call that the Constitution. And you have to adhere to the baseline rules. But outside of that, do as you please. Do whatever it is that you want to do, provided that you don't break these baseline rules. How long do you think it's going to take for people to just go, oh, well, Stefan's the ruler, but we get to do whatever the hell we want in the way that we want to do it. So we're free. We have safety. We have jobs, right? Our cultures are being respected, and we don't care. It's a myth that people care about democracy or that people care about not having kings or not having queens. That's a myth. We don't like corruption. We don't like corrupt leaders. And this is actually the problem with Iran. And we can actually talk about that if you guys want, because that is actually the thing that I think Iran misjudged in this war. When Iran attacked all of its neighbors after Israel and America started attacking Iran, Iran's thinking was that the Gulf states would immediately demand from President Trump a ceasefire, as has happened in the past. One of the big reasons why America has never done this in the past is because the Gulf states have always said, you're going to cause chaos. You're going to cause chaos. Don't do this. Because all of the Gulf states are also, ding, 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 dictatorships, right? And so the one thing that dictatorships can't survive is chaos. People are happy to entertain a dictator, provided that dictator remains or keeps order and ensures prosperity in whichever way the culture views that as being prosperous. And so the Gulf states are very reliant on order and money. And they were hoping that Iran would eventually just change. This is one of the reasons why Saudi joined the BRICS nations, because China told Saudi, we have control of Iran. We have sway over the Iranians. We can tell the Iranians what to do and what not to do. And so they joined. And they were like, oh, okay, this sounds like a good idea. Except it turned out no. The Iranians' will to actually destroy the world is much stronger than China's ability to ask nicely. And so it ended up being a huge mistake. And now you have every single one of the Gulf states attacking Iran. Because Iran thought that if they bombed all of them, they would all tell America to stop. Instead, what all of those nations realized is President Trump is finally the strong leader that might just destroy this regime. And I believe that President Trump had to give some assurances. I believe that every single one of those leaders were on the phone with President Trump and they asked him just one question. Are you going to see this through and end this regime? Or are you going to leave halfway through? Because if you're going to leave halfway through, we don't want this. But if you're willing to see this thing through, we'll help. And I believe that's where we are. I believe that Iran will fall. I believe that will probably bring in a modicum of peace for a while. And then I think we're going to see some truly miraculous things happening in the West. Specifically, the end of democracy as we know it. That's just my opinion, at least. Now, let's get to Bill Clinton's super chat here. Bill, first and foremost, thank you so much for the 140 Rand donation. I truly appreciate you, sir. ANC are not dumb. They know exactly what they are doing. But here in Africa, democracy can never work because the law of the strongest, rudest person applies. Rudest person must rule applies. Bull. I agree with you, but I also disagree with you. I agree with you insofar as the ANC isn't stupid. Right? They're not dumb. They're ideologically captured. So there are some things that the ANC does masterfully well. Their handle on propaganda, their handle on Marxist language, their handle on sort of dual-sided language, as 1984 sort of makes very clear as Marxists speak. On that front, they're very intelligent. But all of their education, the education that the ANC cadres got, date back to the 60s and the 70s. These aren't new ideas. You see, the ANC was never its own organization. The ANC as an organization has only ever existed with the patronage of the Soviet Union. So as the Soviet Union collapses and suddenly that wealth of academic thought from communist Russia disappears, the ANC's growth is sort of stunted. It reaches this point, and then there's no one else to teach them. And so the ANC doesn't know how to really operate in a world that isn't 1960s, 1950s. That's why their language is still so sort of old school. We want land. What do you mean you want land? We're building data centers and businesses in the cloud. What do you want to do with land? Right? Unless you're going to be putting up some data centers on that land is fairly useless, right? Like no one wants land. What do you mean you want land? People want businesses, sure. People want, careers. They want services, but land? Seriously? This makes no sense. But from the ANC's perspective, this is all they know. Because they come from an era where this is all they had. Land was still something that drove value. Land no longer really drives value. Not unless you can develop that land into something worthwhile. Right? And so it's not that they're dumb, it's that they don't know what the next steps are. They're not philosophically minded. And so their big tent has fallen apart. We already started to see this. Joe Slovo was sort of the guy that dreamed up the big tent ANC, where they would the ANC even had plans to bring in all capitalists into the tent. I don't know if you guys know this, but I actually read the Democratic Revolution, the documents from the ANC, all of their intellectual academic papers. I read them. The plan was to eventually even bring in the capitalists. Because the idea from the ANC's perspective was that they're a big tent. And as a big tent, they should find ways for all groups to work together. So you're socialist, you're capitalist, everyone should be able to work together. The big tent has been collapsing ever since the EFF and COPE left. The big tent has just slowly been eroded, and that's because the leaders that are currently in charge no longer understand how to, in the modern economy, keep the tent together. So it's busy collapsing. Nationalism. Okay, someone asked about nationalism. Who was that? America is a constitutional republic, not a democracy. Alienak, I understand the difference, right? I read the constitutional papers. I read the founding papers of America. I understand theoretically the difference between a constitutional republic and a democracy. But I would posit that if I look at the definition of a constitutional republic and I look at the definition of a democracy, America, in a lot of ways, nowadays no longer really function as a constitutional republic and a lot more like a democracy, especially since you have a lot of states in America that has this sort of winner-takes-all approach. So they no longer have that representational democracy that where, if you have congressmen from 12, 4 from this part from the Democrats, and 8 from the Republicans, a lot of the parties now just have that. No, the Democrats won the state, so we send only ours. You have a lot of them that have this sort of. They've changed it now to the popular vote, where they will automatically vote based on what the popular vote was rather than based on what the vote was in their state. So slowly but surely, a lot of that system has already been corrupted to become a democracy rather than remain a constitutional republic. I do actually think constitutional republics should be the future. And I think if America had the ability to go back to being more like a constitutional republic, that would actually also save it. But I see that as much less likely than I see a dictator rising up and saving America. So just to sort of sum that up. But okay, someone asked, how do I feel about nationalism? I am a nationalist myself. I believe that only morons would not be nationalists. I don't really see how you can call yourself an intelligent person and not be a nationalist. The question that I would put to anyone is how can you have any country if you don't believe in nationalism? The idea, the philosophy of nationalism is a simple one. The role of the state is to serve the state. That's nationalism. Nationalism is the government of a country must serve that country. That is the most sensical thing you could ever say. The government of South Africa should not be making rules and laws that don't benefit South Africa, right? In the same way that the American government should not be making rules and laws that don't benefit America. Every government should look up because they were elected by their people to govern them. Therefore, they have a responsibility to their people to govern in favor of those people. So if you have South Africa, for example, making all sorts of rules and moves across the world that put South Africa in a severe disadvantage in favor of countries like Iran and China and Russia, you immediately have to start asking yourself, is this government still in the national interest? Or has this government stepped over towards, maybe closer to treason? Because that is what it would be. In the past, if a country found out that their king was in fact colluding with the king of another country, what do you think would happen to that king? What do you think the peasants and the noblemen would do to that king? I'll give you guys a great example because we have an example of that in history. The King of France is assassinated. Why? Why did the French assassinate their own king? Because he was suspected of being a Protestant. The Protestants, like the English, the fear was that if he becomes a Protestant, he's going to collude with the English. And he's going to allow the English to gain greater control over France. And so he was assassinated effectively on charges of treason. If you don't serve your nation, you're a traitor. Nationalism is the only way governments make sense. If you remove nationalism, you don't have a government. So I am a nationalist, and I think that if you want to care, if you want to believe in such a thing as countries, you have to be a nationalist. Now, is there such a thing as ultra nationalism? Yes, that does exist. Am I an ultra nationalist? No, I am not. So ultra nationalism is the nationalism where we say, I only believe in white people's ability to have a country. So my country must be white. This begs the question, what do we do with all the people who are not white? And this is where you'll find ultra nationalists M&R. Some will say, well, they have to go. Well, where do they have to go? What if they live there? No, they just have to leave. Okay, where and how are you going to make them leave? Right? What do you do with all the people that married and intermarried? You know, you may have white men that married black women. You might have white women that married black men. What are they supposed to do? Well, they're children. Where are they going to live? Right? Or should the man leave and the wife stay? Did the kids go with the man, or do they say, are they white enough or black? Like, how are you going to solve all of this? But that's ultra nationalism. So that's when you take nationalism all the way to skin color. Nationalism is about the nation. Right? So it has nothing to do with your skin color. It has to do with your nationality. So if you are South African, I am for you. Right? And if I am the president, I will be for South Africans. And then it comes down more to ideas rather than to skin color or anything of that nature. So yeah, I am a nationalist 100%. I believe that nationalism is the only right way to be. East London, Nigerian king in East London. Wait, saying what? Ultranationalism can be defined in culture as opposed to arbitrary grounds. So, Yuan, you could have all sorts of ultranationalism, but I would say even nationalism is defined by culture, right? So nationalism mostly is defined by culture. So ultranationalism would go beyond culture. Because remember, if I say culture, the question is, what do we mean when we say culture? Right? Is culture, and this is maybe a genuine question that I can ask all of you, is culture a static thing? Do you believe that your culture belongs to you based on your skin color or based on who your parents were? Or do you believe that culture is a thing that can be taught and learned? See, Chad, that's where I would disagree with you. I don't believe culture is genetic. I believe genetics can play a role in the culture of people, but I don't believe that it is genetic. I think a large part of culture is how you were brought up, but that's learned behavior. I don't believe that it is because if you say that it is genetic, it means that it can't change. Well, then we have some problems, right? We have some serious problems because what you would then need to argue is how is it that some white people believe in communism, non-Slavs? So these are not Slavic people. These are not Russians who may have some adherence to it. How is it that people who believed in freedom and were born to believe in freedom, according to you genetically, are somehow opposed to freedom and want communism rule? Or we could ask the question, how is it that someone like Thomas Sowell, a black man from America, African American, very much not a leftist, very much completely opposed to the ANC and the way the Africans want to do things. If it was genetic, someone like Thomas Sowell wouldn't exist. Because it's genetic. You can't change it. It's in your DNA. It's who you are, right? You were born black, therefore you're going to be a communist adherent, right? Because you're going to be like everyone else in Africa. You were born white, therefore you're going to be. I believe it's taught. I believe culture is something that can be taught. And you want to know how I know it can be taught? I know a couple, two white people, white man, white husband, white woman, white husband. They couldn't have kids, so they adopted kids, two black girls that they adopted. They couldn't have their own children, and these were the only children that they have available, that was available for them to adopt, and so they adopted them, two black daughters. I believe that they were in fact sisters, so they adopted both of them. These black girls today find it super difficult to date. Super difficult to date. And the reason for it is they're black, so the majority of men that would be interested in them are black because that's how South Africa works, right? The problem is that in how they act, how they think, and their culture, they're white. They're Afrikaners. They speak Afrikaans. They don't speak English. Well, they speak English, they speak Afrikaans, but they don't speak any African languages. They act like Afrikaners. So they meet black guys, but the black guys don't really care about them because they don't act like an African lady would. The white guys, well, we still have that problem in South Africa, so, that exists. Therefore, I know for a fact that it's taught. Right? Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't some genetic traits that you could drag and pull from. I do agree with you there. I do think that there is some genetic traits. So do I think that, an African born in Africa is going to be brought up to believe in African tribalism and the way that the tribes function? Most likely, yes. Right? But I'm not entirely convinced that that can't be changed. But I think in order to change that, you'd need a long time, and it would have to be very slowly. So you'd need a long time. I think for now, the better solution, because I don't believe that this is something that can be taught. The guy is 21 years old. He grew up in Africa with African parents, and he has this African ideology and idea. Now you can just teach him how to be a capitalist. That I don't believe. I don't think that would work. I think if you want that, it would have to be slowly. So with every generation, you'd have to teach the next generations how to be more freedom oriented, how to be more capitalistic, and then slowly but surely you will get people who just emerge from that ideal. So that is sort of where I fall. I respect the fact that you think it's fully genetic. I respect that. Like you're allowed to that opinion. I wouldn't say that I necessarily support that opinion. Well, Clinton, thank you so much for the $140, dude. Really appreciate you, sir. Thank you. I wasn't born in South Africa. I grew up in a communist country and came to SA as a child. I consider myself as South African, and I owe a lot to this country as you welcome me with open arms. I love SA. Bill Clinton, and we love you, as long as you're not a communist. In which case, if you are a communist, I don't love you. I'm grateful for the money, but I definitely wish I could change your mind on the communism thing. The truth is, I actually have communist friends. Like I do, like fully 100% honest. I have friends who are communists, and I love them. They're amazing people, but we have some hard conversations about their politics. And one thing I find very often when it comes to communists is very few of them can back up their opinions. A lot of communists have these they have these snapshot beliefs. And as soon as you start probing and prodding them, that falls apart quick. So they tend to shut down the conversation the second you start probing and pushing a little bit too much. So it takes a while. Would a communist super chat? Hey, I mean, you have people like Hassan that make a ton of money from his communist buddies. So I'm sure some of the communists do actually super chat. Very anti-communist. My parents' disappointment. Hey, Bull, I'm grateful then for you, and God bless you, bro. Happy to have you here in South Africa. We need more anti-communists in this country, we do have that. It is starting to happen. It's slow, but it is starting to happen. We have more and more, especially black people, that are starting to turn against communism, that are starting to turn against the government, and that is great. I just don't know if we have enough time left. That's the thing that I think scares me most. I'm not sure how much time we have left. The problem with communism is sooner or later you run out of other people's money. Margaret Thatcher, yep, I agree. 100% agree with her. you are you hang around with, you become your surroundings. Yeah, so if we talk about the IQ thing, because Chad, I saw you bringing up IQ. How did it happen that in less than 30, close to 40 years, the Chinese people went from barely registering to now almost the second highest IQ holders in the world? There was a cultural push to focus on education, to get every single child through school, through a approved education system, where they focused very heavily on the things that we test for in IQ scores and in IQ tests. Right? And so, yes, that absolutely did happen. And the Chinese, their IQs appear to be going up. The same is true for Jews, right? Ashkenazi Jews, for example, are the highest IQ holders in the world. But again, we look at the way that they're educated and we see a very different approach. Then we look across the West and we're actually seeing slight declines in IQ as we have changed our education system, as we have sort of adapted the way in which we approach things, and our kids are no longer trained in just pure mathematics, pure language. We're starting to see that go down. Destructive, how you doing, bro? Thank you very much. I really appreciate you. And I know it's going down. I don't even need the taste, although the tastes are showing that it's going down. And we have to understand IQ means a lot. If it's going down by 0.1 or 0.2%, or by 0.1 or 0.2, that is a massive drop. And it is going to compound. And I know that the IQ of the general white person in the West is going down because I have conversations with people every single day of my life. I have conversations with people on X where basic sentences make no sense because they have completely lost the ability to think contextually about an argument because their education system no longer teaches it. And so you make an argument, they cannot think about the context within which that argument is made. That proves to me that there is a severe decline in the IQ of Western white people as a result of the education system and as a result of what parents are now focused on. And I think we could go even further and say the fact that mothers are no longer in the home but forced to go to work means that kids are no longer growing up with the primary caretaker that really cares about the future of her children. And so, these kids are handed over to public schools where the government simply trains them to be good little workers. So, from my perspective, I respect, I'll just leave it here. I respect your opinion, right? You think it's genetic, you think it is only genetic. I respect that. Right? If that's what you believe, then go for it. I do not agree with that because I've met enough black people, colored people, Indian people who prove to me that there's more to that. There's way more to it. Oh, I'm a liberal because of one thing, Chad. Because of this one thing, I'm a liberal. I would argue you're probably very fundamentalist in your view. You see, what you demand is absolute adherence to your view and your view only. We call that indoctrinated. If you can't even understand that there is range to things, and you can have people that largely agree with you on most things, but still disagree with you on some others. If you just firmly demand that, that's very authoritarian of you. a demand that you must view things my way or else you're a liberal. Even though I hold no liberal ideas on anything other than the fact that I don't agree with you that it is genetic. All of my other views are firmly conservative. I am a liberal. Because of that one thing, Chad, I think you have a problem, my good man. I think you have a problem. And I would invite you to take a long, hard look at yourself and at your own views, because the way in which you view the world, that sort of hardline authoritarian view, that's not healthy for you. It is not healthy to divide the world in these firm us versus them dichotomies where you get to decide who is the us and who is the them. And ultimately, it shifts on a whim. Oh, they don't agree with me. Liberal. Let's go. That is, you are heading towards a very bad place. There is a range to about almost everything. True. No, I am sure that's true, Chad. I'm sure that's true. All right. Debate societies were something in every school growing up a while ago. No arguments, purely debating without losing your cool. I think a lot of people have lost that ability. I think a lot of people have lost the ability to argue and debate and to reason. I don't know how much of that is just the internet age. The fact that there's literally no real barrier to entry anymore, and so there's nothing to lose. I could just switch off my PC and just go on with my life, and so who cares, right? I genuinely don't know. Most of the Arabized world does not even know that it had a beautiful culture before it was conquered. What happened to, I would say, Persia, and what happened to the Arab world more largely, I think, is devastating. You are absolutely correct. Um, One can only hope that they will eventually retake what was stolen from them so very long ago. Government and have more regional autonomy. Lisa, you're not wrong. Like, I absolutely agree with you there. Absolutely agree with you there. Um, you can have democracy if it is incredibly limited. So very decentralized. Power needs to be as close to the people that they're governing as is humanly possible. So you almost want province mayors to have the most power in a country, and then maybe the in America they call them governors. Here we call them premiers. Then maybe the premiers, and then maybe only the ministers and stuff. So yes, people tend to be more willing to accept power when that power is closer to home. So you're absolutely correct on that. That the base cultures, the Persians, the Berbers, the Egyptians. Decline in Western IQ is also as a result of a shift in cultural values. Marlo, I absolutely think that ultimately I think the long march through the institutions left the West more stupid than ever before, and also more incapable of doing anything about it. Now, I hope that all of you understand what I mean when I say the long march through the Constitution, right? Nor are they interested in doing so. I think AI, yes, but I think I don't even think AI is the main culprit. I think I think social media did far more to damage children's ability. So one of the things that I've completely stopped, I no longer watch YouTube shorts. I completely stopped that. Because YouTube Shorts is one of the primary ways of wasting time. Like, you want to lose an hour and a half of your day, go watch a YouTube Short. Joe, I do read comments. Yes. What's up? I ignore some comments because if I've argued with someone for a bit and I realize there's nowhere this argument is going, I'll just ignore it. I still read it, but I don't really respond. But I do read all comments. Yes. If you're asking on videos, yes, every single morning of my life. So my schedule in the mornings is as follows: I wake up, I go to the gym, I come home from the gym, I have coffee, and then I sit and I read through comments. And here and there, I'll respond if I see a comment that I think, oh, this requires a response. But more often than not, comments sort of shape my views in videos. Yeah, the aircon is finally working, but it's also quite cool today, so not as bad at the moment. Is yours TikTok, Instagram all the same? Yeah, I deleted Instagram a long time ago on my PC. Because Instagram is one of the most dangerous apps you can have, right? So I no longer have Instagram on my phone. I no longer really visit Instagram at all, even on my PC. Um, if you want to struggle with lust, go on Instagram. It'll figure out how to get lost is a big problem in your life. So I deleted Instagram. I deleted TikTok and YouTube Shorts. Well, you can't delete YouTube Shorts, but I don't watch them anymore, mainly because it just wastes time. And then I've also limited my X participation. I now have specific times during the day where I'll read X. And if it's not that time of the day, then I just don't read it. And this is also one of the reasons I no longer make shorts. Because someone suggested I should make more YouTube shorts, and my immediate was, I believe that YouTube shorts is one of the worst types of content you can produce. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't make YouTube shorts. If that's what you do and it's what you love and it's where your views come from, I see your message literally just now. If that's where your views come from, go for it, right? But I think in terms of what's harmful to society, I think YouTube Shorts is incredibly harmful to society. Anita, how you doing? Most of the world was on the gravy train and the US was abused. Same with Africa. Give us money, but do not tell us what to say or do. Anita, you're very, very much on point. Yes, absolutely true. Are we a bit off topic, or did I miss what the fatal miscalculation was? Johan, so I already finished that conversation around probably 40, maybe 50 minutes ago. So normally when I have a topic that I want to discuss, I always discuss that in the first, like as soon as I start the stream, I will immediately start the topic so that people can see what the topic was about and then move on, right? But I stay afterwards to just sort of chat and have a conversation with the viewers, because people have things that they want to talk about, people have things that they want to say, and I don't want to just leave, right? I get it. There's a bunch of YouTubers that they do their topic and they turn off, but I like talking to you guys, so I like to stay for an extra hour, usually hour and a half, and just sort of get your ideas and thoughts and stuff. So yeah, we're off topic at the moment. What is clickbait about that paracopter? Separate development based on spiritual differences. Could it work? Was a question that was once asked. I think separate development is really the only thing that can work at this point. In 1987, my Dutch grandfather told me that the outcome would be when the ANC came into power, and he was correct. Oh, Joe, I don't doubt that. I mean, I have family members who voted no in that referendum, and they didn't vote no because they hated black people or because they didn't want black people to be able to vote. Their problem was that they correctly surmised that once the black majority can vote, the white minority will never again have any say in the direction of this country. And that's not wrong. Look, fundamentally, democracy can only really work if everyone feels like they have if everyone feels like they have the ability to participate, right? And they have the ability to influence the system. Democracy is very much a give and take. I sometimes I lose, sometimes I win, but it's that makes it fair. But what do you do when your people for the last 30 years have never won and have no ability to win? Is that still a fair system? What do you do when your people pay the overwhelming majority of tax and yet your people has zero representation? So in other words, you have taxation without representation. What do you do? And Chad, at the risk of upsetting you again, I probably don't view separate development the same as you. And I've made that point multiple times in the past. You see, what always baffles me about the sort of hardline racial guys, right? So the guys that believe, uh, white is right or whatever, right? If I go based on your ideological belief, I may end up living next to someone like Peter Kriel or Max de Pree or Carl Niehaus or Kim Heller or Hillary Clinton or Bill Clinton or Bill Gates. I might actually end up living next to someone like that. And I'll tell you now, I would rather jump out of a plane without a parachute and take my chances with gravity than live next to people like that. So when your idea of separate development is racially based, I'm not entirely sure what the hell you mean. I would much rather live next to a black guy that happens to also be conservative and view capitalism as a good idea, because at least with that guy, I know I can build a future. So basing separate development on race, to my mind, is one of the stupidest things you could ever do. Because, well, there happens to be a lot of white people out there that I have very little time for. Like, I really do not like those white people. Then there happen to be, for the same fact, a lot of black people that I love because they view the world the same as I do, and I can see myself building a future with those people. So yeah, I definitely do not believe in separate developments as a racial thing. Oh, Chad. So in other words, every single person that you deem to be a traitor will be killed. So that's the solution. In other words, we're gonna round up all of the people we view as traitors and we're gonna kill them. What happens in about 5 years? Let's say you do get your separatist state, and now you have this new country, and you've killed all the traitors. They're all dead now. But now 5 years later, there's new people that started to become more communist. You kill them too. What happens if slowly but surely this underground movement becomes the majority? Can they now kill you? Or is it only ever you killing them? But you've not thought this through. Because from their perspective, you are also a traitor. From my perspective, I want to live with people that view the world the same way I do. I don't care what your race is. I don't care what you look like or sound like. If what you care about is conservatism, Christianity, and the rule of law, and you view the world the same way that I do, I want to live with you. And I want to share a country with you because I believe that I can build forward with someone like you. What I don't believe is that I can build a country with people like Kim Heller or people like Peter Kriel, even though they're white. I don't believe that I can build a country with him. And I'll go so far, Chad, as saying that I can't build a country with you because your views don't make any sense. So I would tell you, go build your country. Sure, take whatever land you want and go build your country. I believe that in your country, you will slaughter each other because you will have these constant purity tests. Everyone would have to be more pure than everyone else. And eventually you'll just kill each other because you're all trying to prove that you're more racially pure than everyone else. Um, I don't care about that. Chad sounds like he will open his house to drug lords to share his food. No, Chad, that's a very weak argument. Or you just haven't thought about it enough. I could make the same argument that you're doing. You have not thought about your own position hard enough. But anyways, if you want democracy to work, there are three simple things. You are only eligible to vote if, one, you are older than 25, neurological maturity. Two, I would actually move that to 35, Marlo. You have paid income tax for 75% of the previous 4-year cycle. And three, you have passed a competency exam to vote. Okay, so here's what I would actually say, Marlo. My own system of democracy. If I were to believe in democracy, and if I were to think that democracy was the right way, let me do the following for you. In order to vote, you must be older than 35. This allows for a couple of things to happen, but most importantly, it allows for young people to be young people and focus on what matters: building a life and building a future and building a family. So you have until the age of 35 before you have to worry about politics. More importantly, you don't get taxed until you reach the age of 35 because there can be no taxation without representation. So taxes only start at the age of 35. There would already be a VAT or a sales tax, and so the government would still make money on the things that you buy, but you'd be able to, use your money for what matters, making a life for yourself. So I think that's important, right? Up until the age of 35. The next one. Unless you've served in the military, you do not get to vote. And here's why. Voting is violence. Voting is merely the replacement of violence, right? Instead of going with a gun and changing the government, you can now make a little X next to a name. But the underlying principle of it is still a violent act. You are still violently changing a government and enforcing that government upon the people who did not support that particular government. So unless you have the ability to actually use that violence, you don't get to exercise that violence. So every single person that wants to vote has to serve in the military. I think that's the least that can be demanded, right? If you don't want to serve in the military, you don't have to, but then you can also not vote. I believe that's a simple ask. I also then believe that there should be a maximum age after which people can no longer vote. So if you're older than 65 or perhaps 70, then voting also disappears for you because you're old now, right? You can no longer really vote on what the future of the country is going to be. And then very specifically, voting only applies to taxpayers. So if you don't pay taxes, you don't get to vote. And this is to eliminate politicians from being able. So I agree with a lot of your points, but I think I make them even a little bit more extreme. I agree. No non-taxpayers, nobody under 25 or IQ or below 100 could vote. So, Anita, why I say under 35, I want young people to focus on the thing that makes them economically viable. I don't want young people to care about politics because it's not their realm. Until you have actually, because it's not just about cognitive development. It's about actually participating in the economy. Until you have built your own business or did your own job and actually provided for a family, you will have no idea how the world works. I remember this was funny. I had a friend. This was years ago. She lived in the UK and she worked for a pharmaceutical company. At university, she was a hardline socialist, almost a communist, right? And we used to have plenty of conversations about her communism, and we would have plenty of arguments. And she would, we ultimately, our friendship ended as a result of me not being a communist, being a capitalist, and her being a communist. And she thought I was heartless and evil, right? Um, Maybe like 3 or 4 years pass and we reconnect. I can't remember how. I think she sent me a message saying happy birthday or something to that effect. Um, and I was surprised. I was like, whoa, wow, interesting. It's been years, and I said, oh, hey, how you doing? And we started reconnecting. We started chatting again, and a few months went by of us just chatting. And one day I thought I'd ask, and I was like, so are you still a communist? And she said, no. And I said, why? And she said the first time she got her paycheck. And now she works for a pharmaceutical company, so she makes good money. And she was like, why the hell does the government get to take the money that I work for? That was the moment that it all switched on for her. And she was like, wait, but this is very unfair. I work my ass off every single day, and the government just gets to take like half of it. That's insanity. Right. And so I want young people to first go into the world and experience what the world is really like. And then they can vote. Right? Because that's the moment that you will understand what is the purpose of voting. And I think you should change the education system as well, where kids need to understand why this voting is important and what is important. So that we don't end up with kids voting for their own demise. And we can have some seriously angry debates about this as well. Because there's definitely something that I think our society needs to figure out. Something that we have not dealt with yet. And I fully recognize that I'm about to upset at least 20% of my audience. But I want to preface it by saying Pandora's box have already been opened. As a result of that, Pandora's box cannot be closed. At least I don't see a way in which to close it. So I am not arguing, right, that women should lose their ability to vote. That's not the argument here. But we have to, as a society, figure out how to exist in a world where women can vote. Because I would wager that that's not obvious to me. We as a society have not figured that out yet. And before you completely lose your cool, and I realize there's a lot of women in this chat that probably hate me right now, please listen closely to what I have to say next. In the West, the people who are voting for their own demise are women. All the politicians that are demanding more and more immigration from third world nations are supported by women. The men who are trying to save society are the ones that the women hate. But then those self-same women are crying and screaming for protection. Because they're the ones being raped. They're the ones being attacked. They're the ones who are being victimized by a lot of these immigrants. And yet they keep supporting the policies that bring these immigrants into the nation. And so I think as a society, we have not yet figured out how to deal with women voting. And there's a good reason for this. Women's capacity for empathy is incredibly helpful in a very large number of ways, specifically in child rearing and in bringing up children. A woman's capacity for empathy in understanding pain and suffering, it's invaluable. And then something that a lot of people don't even talk about is that societies were not built by men. Societies were safeguarded by men. The men were on the walls, keeping out the barbarians. The women were inside building the structures of society, figuring out how do people deal with each other, figuring out how do we solve our problems on a societal level. Because it's fine. Main solution to problems is I'll just kill you, no problem. And that's genuine. Historically speaking, that is how men deal with problems. We have a tribe that wants our stuff, we'll just kill them, and then there's no one wants our stuff anymore. We're fine. A woman in society, you can't just kill each other, right? So you have to sort of figure out how do we solve our problems without killing each other. And this is where women were invaluable, because your empathy, your agreeableness made that possible. But the moment women received the right to vote, women were now also in a position to vote for the safeguarding of society. And a lot of women are now applying that self-same tools that make them incredible mothers and incredible, I would say, stewards of society, are threatening to tear apart the society at the seams. And we have to figure out how to deal with that. We have to figure out how do we get women to recognize that sometimes an enemy is just an enemy. And I don't know how we do that. I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know how we do that. Even my mother says women shouldn't vote. Most women don't actually want to vote. Even at the time, only about 9% of women supported the right to vote. In fact, the feminists ultimately had to get the men to vote for women to be able to vote, because the women would just not vote for it. Like, most women don't really care. Same with work. Most women didn't want to work. In fact, the leader of the feminist movement, I can't remember her name now, but it's some French lady. She actually famously said, we can't give women a choice between being housewives and being in the workplace, because all women would choose to be housewives. So it is true. But remember, society has also changed. Culture has also changed. And so if you suddenly just turned around and said, no more voting, no more work, there will be a lot of turmoil, and a lot of women will not be happy about that. Right? And I don't know about you guys, but I kind of like women. So I don't want to go to war with women. And that would probably lead to at least some kind of fighting that I would like to avoid. So I don't know how you put this back. It's genuinely just one of those fun things that I think about. But I don't know how you solve it. I just don't, you know. Women in the Workforce was a deliberate social engineering project to double the tax base. The majority of women did not want to have to work, and originally women felt similarly about voting. Marlo, yeah, agree. Excellent argument, Stefan. Esther, thank you very much. I hope that, you know, I didn't piss off too many of the women. As a woman, I agree. Lol, have you been listening to Andrew and Rachel Wilson by any chance? I have not, but I know who they are. Right? I'm not a huge fan of Andrew Wilson's. Not because I don't like his arguments. I just don't like his debating style. So the way in which he debates is, I oftentimes feel like it's not really conducive to a healthy argument. Like, it's good to own, but I don't think it's good to change minds. And I think if you're going to debate someone, you have to want to change the mind of the person that you're debating. And more often than not, online debates is just to score points, and I don't like that. Right? I think he's incredibly intelligent, and I think he's very good at internet debating. But I happen to prefer debates where we are actively trying to change others' minds. We're not just, you know, screaming loudly to hope that we're winning points. So I have tremendous respect for what he does. I share a lot of his views. I've heard some of Rachel Wilson. I'll admit, not as much. The particular stuff about feminism is stuff that I've researched in my previous life, because gaming is suffering under feminism. Like, the video game industry, I think a lot of you probably don't play video games. But if those of you who do play video games will know, like the entertainment industry is rotten to the core with feminist left wing propaganda, and it has destroyed so many video games. And so in that life, one of the topics that I researched a lot was sort of feminism, the long march through the institutions. Uh, this was a huge topic for me. So that's how I learned about all of that. How they massacred my boys. Oh yeah, like dude, I don't think you'll get a more heartbroken community than the gaming community. Genuinely the saddest thing that you could ever know. True, you need to be seeking a loss to learn or a win to help the other. Yeah, I think so. My current solution to fixing the problem um, is to enable the church. I think that's the only way you can do it. Government cannot fix culture. This is one of the things that I would deviate from with people like Andrew Wilson. I am a Christian nationalist, but not in the way that I'm not a theonomist, right? I'm not a theonomist. I'm not a theocratist. I don't believe that the government should be involved in religion. I believe what the government should do is enable the church. And I believe that the church can fix a lot of the underlying problems. So, for example, I think, and I see this at my own church, the women who attend my church don't vote. Most of the women who attend my church don't work because they don't want to. They want to be mothers and they want to be housewives. They don't pay attention. I spoke to one of my friends. I'm very good friends with her husband, but I'm also friends with her. She's in the choir with me, and as we were talking, I started talking politics with my brother, and I asked her opinion on the thing that we were talking about, and she was like, "I don't know any of this." And I said, "How can you not know this? This is news." And she genuinely said the following to me: "My husband knows this. I don't have time for it." And then I asked her husband, and he was like, "Yeah, I keep on top of political stuff to know how to keep them safe so that they don't have to worry about it." She lives her life. According to her, life's great because if something goes wrong, she knows her husband is on top of it. He'll protect her, he'll serve her, he'll make sure that she's fine. She can just raise the children and be a mother. And she is at her happiest doing that. And she's not the only one. The vast majority of women in my church, that's the life that they have, and that's the life that they want. They don't want to have the responsibility of having to care about politics, having to care about voting. That's not for them, right? That's the job of their husbands. They should be the ones to do it. So I think by enabling the church, you'll automatically fix a lot of the sort of underlying problems of society. And most Christian women are conservative anyway. So even if they are voting, they're going to vote for the conservative parties, right? Which means you still win. How many homes is it? Joe, on the one hand, I do agree with you. But on the other hand, we should never underestimate the role that men had in that destruction. Women didn't just out of nowhere decide we want to start working and we want to start voting. Men had a hand in that. Men became weak. We started focusing on the wrong things and we stopped doing the things that women relied on us for, which is safety and security. We handed that stuff to the state so that we could sort of make money. Because, hey, it's a new world. We can make money now. And the government, being as bad as it is with literally everything, failed at keeping women safe. And so what are they supposed to do? The men are off playing and remaining boys, and the women are left to fend for themselves. And so they needed to take power. If you want that power back, you have to start being a man. Because, and I'll tell you this, there's very few, even feminists, that remain feminists in the face of a real man. A guy that takes care of his crap and she knows that she is safe with him, she'll relent all of that power. She'll just hand it over because she can now just be a woman. She can just, be carefree and live her life. But you have to first be the man worthy of that. You have to be the man that she can feel safe enough with. And I fear this is where fathers are failing their sons. It's a mess that we have to clean up. I don't know when we're going to clean it up, but hopefully we will. Hopefully in time we will, We have to believe that we can ultimately get there. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, we're already 15 minutes over our time. Is there anything that I have missed? Anything that you would like me to cover or talk about that I have not done yet today? Like the strength of a great typhoon? I believe women should have at least some form of work to support their family. The whole independent women movement starts with married women losing their supportive men in World War I and World War II. So, Boer, the misconception here is that we say women should not be allowed to work. Women have always worked throughout history, right? Women have always worked. When I say we should empower the church to give women back the life that they crave, what I'm talking about is women marrying their careers. Because that, I think, is the thing that the feminist movement has stolen from women. The feminist movement came in and said, you don't need a man, you don't need a family, you can have a career instead. Marry your job. Go be a girl boss. The problem is that women reach the age of 40 as the girl boss and are desperately unhappy. The happiness doesn't seem to come from being the girl boss. Right? And so that's what I mean. We should try and get young women to realize your career is the biggest impediment to your happiness, because it will never make you happy. In the same vein that a career doesn't make a man happy either. The happiest a man can be is having the ability to provide for his family, having a happy wife and happy kids. That's happiness for a man. Most men work so that they can provide for their families. The feminist movement said to women, work so that you can work. And that's the wrong way to think about it, I think. I find Count Dankula super funny. Cybertone, I think he's hilarious. I like him. Like him, Carl Benjamin. There's quite a few people in the UK that I really have a lot of respect for and I really enjoy. I think I like the UK people from the UK quite a lot because they're sort of stiff upper lip, like they have a generally a different approach. Like even when they're angry, they're at least trying to do it with a very, with sophistication. I like that. I find the refined gentleman a healthy change of pace. But then I also have a bunch of American dudes that I really enjoy listening to. I just consume a lot of content every single day of my life, right? Either by reading or by watching podcasts or by watching YouTube videos. I try to listen to as many people as possible and figure out what works and what doesn't, Douglas Murray is also great, although I didn't like Douglas Murray all that much in his debate with Adam. Was it Adam Smith? No, it's not Adam Smith. What's his name now? Dave Smith. Adam Smith is the father of modern economics. Sorry. I didn't like Douglas Murray in that debate. I thought Douglas Murray became the very thing that he spent all his time fighting against. Because suddenly when it came to Israel, unless you're an expert on Israel, you shouldn't be talking. It's like, wait, but you didn't say the same thing about COVID. We accepted that the experts were the ones who lied to us during COVID. So during COVID, you did not hold that only the experts get to have an opinion and everyone else should just follow the opinion. But now suddenly you believe that only experts on Israel get to have an opinion on what Israel is doing. I don't agree with Dave Smith's views, just to be clear. I think Dave Smith acts like he reasons like a little child. I think Tucker Carlson reasons like a little child as well. These are people who believe that America can be the world's strongest nation without ever enforcing any laws or rules. They believe that if America just stopped, fighting, all countries would just start singing "Kumbaya," and that's just not how it works. That's not the real world. War is necessary in order to establish peace. That's just how it is. Sometimes you have to have a war in order to have peace, and sadly, they don't view it that way. So I don't agree with Dave Smith on much, but uh, Douglas Murray lost that debate the moment he took on Dave Smith for being only a comic. Because that was his entire argument. You're a comic. What the hell do you know about the Middle East? And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Just because the guy doesn't have a degree in geopolitics doesn't mean that his opinion is wrong. You have to take his opinion as is, and you have to debunk that opinion. Right? You have to refute that position. So yeah, I didn't like Douglas Murray a lot in the Joe Rogan debate with Dave Smith. But other than that, I find Douglas Murray still a really good voice on a lot of issues. They don't either, and I talk about it all the time. Yeah, look, no one is going to be 100% correct all the time, right? And so I always try to be gracious towards other people, and I always try to understand that people make mistakes. So even though Douglas Murray made a complete fool of himself on Joe Rogan, at least to my mind, I still respect him because of all the other things that he's done that has been incredibly well done. Sometimes people just make mistakes, and the same with Dave Smith. Just to be clear, there's a lot of things that I actually agree with Dave Smith on. And I find Dave Smith to be a really good guy on a lot of issues. But his views on war, in my opinion, are childlike. The same with Tucker Carlson. Their view on the interrelationship between nations is the view of a child. And so I don't support that. But I think Tucker Carlson in a lot of other ways are incredible. And I support the work that he does. Right? So I happen to be one of those guys that I believe that you and I can disagree on some things. And I can still find a lot of value in the other things that you do. No, Cyber, there's a lot of argument. Like a lot of people are sort of accusing Tucker Carlson of because I think he bought a house in Qatar, and so a lot of people are accusing him of actually being a foreign agent or a double agent. I don't put a lot of stock into that. I think Tucker Carlson's biggest flaw is Tucker Carlson was lied to for a long time, and he served the military-industrial complex for a long time. And at some point, Tucker Carlson was awakened to the military-industrial complex, and he realized that they had lied to him for a long time about the role of America in the world. And so Tucker went from being all in on all war to never war ever, ever again. So he went from one extreme to the exact opposite extreme, when the reality has to be in the middle. Some war, some of the time. If you want world peace, war has to always be an option. Because what do you do with nations that threaten peace? If you have a nation that is telling you we're going to drop some bombs on you, you not acting is not actually preserving peace. That's you just signing your own death warrant. And so I think Tucker Carlson just went way too far to this. And I think the same is true for Dave Smith. I think Dave he views the military of America with so much suspicion that everything they say is just a lie, just an automatic lie. Can't believe you. You're a liar. So yeah, that's sort of where I think they are. This is a very nuanced take on Tucker Carlson. I like to extend grace, Saint, as I said. I will never just come to a conclusion without at least a lot more evidence of it. Right? Musa, let me put it to you this way. Confirmation bias is one hell of a drug. There is no such thing as someone that is too smart in order to suffer from confirmation bias. It is ingrained in us. No one is above ideological capture. No one. No one is too smart or too awake or too logical or too rational. That's just not how it works. The way in which you get out of that mindset is through challenging yourself. But oftentimes that challenge has to happen almost violently, right? So it has to be something where you weren't prepared for it and someone was able to challenge you to the point where cognitive dissonance kicked in. And that's usually where you'll start to view some changes. But I can't contribute malice when an explanation for ignorance exists. So if I look at the ANC, I can attribute malice because there is a history of repeated mistakes that continue to play out. There is a history of warnings that are continuously avoided and continuously ignored. And there is a history of enrichment on the side of the ANC where they directly benefit from their bad decisions at the expense of South Africa, to where I can now with reasonable certainty say the ANC is most likely malicious. But when it comes to someone like Tucker Carlson, someone like Dave Smith, I have to extend grace and say, look, maybe they are ideologically captured, but maybe they're not. Right? Maybe they are just ignorant, and maybe they are just speaking from a position of ignorance, or maybe they're not. I don't know yet. I don't know yet. And it's going to take someone like Tucker Carlson getting into a debate with someone that can genuinely challenge those views. Now, this is the problem with being ideologically captured. You tend to avoid people that challenge your views because it's uncomfortable. Having your views challenged is not a fun experience. No one wants their views challenged. So yeah, I personally extend grace where possible to as many people as possible. I try not to jump to conclusions too quickly because I have a sense of doing that. I have a history of jumping. I have what is known as an inductive mind. So my brother, for example, has a deductive mind. He's incredibly good at deducing information. I have an inductive mind, meaning I'm very quick to jump to conclusions, and oftentimes the correct conclusion. Right? So you'll tell me something, you'll explain a concept to me, and without you even finishing the concept, I can connect the dots and I can get to what it is. Right? So I can induce that stuff. The problem with that is it opens me up to jumping to conclusions very quickly. So I'll see a couple of things and I go, oh, that's that. Right? So boom, I've got my conclusion. Now I just look at everything through that conclusion. So I try where possible to say, no. Let's leave the conclusions out of it and let's keep an open mind. Let's really examine this. I do not like what Tucker Carlson has become. I do not like what Dave Smith has become on the Israel issue. So from that perspective, I will criticize them. But the reason for their actions, that I don't know. I don't know what those are. And I don't want to jump to a conclusion on that yet. But I'm open-minded. If I see evidence that they are in fact bought and paid for, then I will definitely change my mind very quickly. Only 6.7 million voted for the ANC, and only about 12 million voted for the parties in the GNU. Only 60 million voted. Mr. Alphaza, how you doing, sir? You are correct, but majority rules is majority of those who voted. So, those who didn't vote don't get the vote. And so it's still, technically, they would argue it's still majority rules. Um, Tucker was always a bit off the wall, but made sense, and I enjoyed him. But recently, he's not listenable, so he's so practically batshit crazy with his concepts. I will admit, the logical jumps that Tucker Carlson makes has become very difficult for me to listen to. And I've also identified clear examples of manipulation, which does bother me. So Tucker Carlson has this way where he'll sit there and he'll say, "Yeah, and some people accuse me of being a traitor, which I'm not. I'm obviously not a traitor. I love this country. I love America." That's manipulation. The softening of the voice, the appealing to the emotional side of that's manipulation. And that usually, not always, and this still needs to be kept in mind, that usually is the mark of someone that is knowingly lying and yet trying to sell the lie. So that is definitely something that bothers me. Tucker has this way of almost becoming too calm and collected and almost like soft spoken in the way that he makes his points, and that bothers me a little. So that is definitely stuff that I've noticed that I'm like, oh, I don't like that. What do you think of Konstantin Kisin? Love him. I love Konstantin Kisin. I think Konstantin Kisin has a severe anti-Russian bias, but I do like him. I think Konstantin Kisin is probably one of the most logical thinkers on the internet. Doesn't mean he doesn't have his flaws. It doesn't mean he doesn't make mistakes. The only person I would say is more rational and more logical than Konstantin Kisin is Asmongold. And I know that sounds crazy. Asmongold, the dude that sits in his bedroom full of cockroaches. But have you ever listened to Asmongold's arguments? Asmongold has this insane ability to cut through the heart of noise and just understand the crux of the argument. Like he's the level of rationality that Asmongold has is truly off the charts. Yeah, I know he cleaned his room. Either crap, but most people still know him as the guy with the dirty room. Stable, logical, sane one left. Asmongold is a regular dude that voices his thoughts clearly. Cybertoast, I would actually say he's probably more than just a regular dude. Like that level of the only other person I know of in my life that possesses that level of rationality and logic is my brother. My brother that's about 3 years younger than me. We have a friend who has his PhD in nuclear physics, and he has like 3 or 4 master's degrees. And after spending, I think it was like 3 or 4 evenings with my brother, like just hanging out, right? And they were just talking. This guy turned to me and he said, "Your brother is a logical machine, an analytical machine." Because my brother is like this. He is analytical to a T and logical to a T. But that's the only other person I know of, and I love having him as a brother because all of my arguments I test against him. So when I come up with one of my judgment calls, I'll go to him and I'll say, "So let's talk. Here's how I view it. This is my conclusions. This is what I think." And then my brother will go, "Okay, but have you thought about this? 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 How does this fit?" So it sort of forces me to test my own arguments. Converting what? Is reading the Quran, I heard. Wait, Asmongold is reading the Quran? He loves Asmongold more than me as a son. That dude takes it to a new level. That is true, actually. Um, I mean, I've heard from people, just to be clear, I know a couple of people who do a lot of work under Muslims who firmly believe that the Quran is cursed. They believe that there are demons working actively within the Quran. Because the Quran does have power. There's a lot of weird stuff in the Quran, and people who read the Quran do get infected by it. So there is a possibility of it, but I think if you're aware of what you're doing and you're reading it just to really learn, um, I mean, I read the Quran. This was many, many years ago, but I read it, and the amount of contradictions in that book is enough to make you go, okay, never mind. Clearly, this book does not know what's going on. Beliefs about Islam, if I'm correct, Asman is much more likely to join the 10th Crusade than convert. My hope would be, and my prayer is, that someone like Asmongold does convert, that he becomes a Christian. That's my genuine hope, is that Asmongold finds God. I have the same hope for Alex O'Connor. I think Alex O'Connor is on the way. I think he's started the journey. That journey just needs to be completed now. And then, of course, my other hope is that you guys will have a phenomenal weekend. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming out, for hanging out, for spending time with me. Neo, I'm sorry that you arrived right at the end of the stream, but I'm still happy to have seen you here. Unless something huge happens, I'll probably not be live tomorrow. But if something huge happens, you'll see the stream be scheduled, and then you can just come say hello. I'll probably have some of the stuff that we spoke about today. I'll upload it as separate stuff, because I've had quite a few people ask me they don't want to watch the full live streams, but they do want to see the conversations that we're having. And so I'll see if tomorrow morning I can quickly take the live stream and just cut out the most important parts of it and upload that for you guys. Just in case there are some of you that don't care and you don't want to watch the entire live stream. Because there's now been more than enough people that's asked me that I'll try and do that for you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming out, for hanging out with me, for spending time with me. I hope you had a ton of fun. I hope you enjoyed it. Please have a wonderful weekend. It is already 20 to 3. So I'm hoping a lot of you are already on your way home, already on your way to go and get ready for tomorrow's barbecue. I have a barbecue at church on Sunday, the church barbecue, so I'm super excited for that one. It's going to be a blast. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, be good to each other, be kind to each other, and I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.